It's time for the Phil Ferguson Show.
This is Phil Ferguson, and you are listening to the Phil Ferguson Show. It is summer, 2023, in case you're listening to this some point in the amazing future, where everything's better, everything's fixed. We later have today an interview with Ryan Burge. He has become well known for writing articles about religion and the nuns. You know, it wasn't really planned that this was a theme for this late spring, early summer stuff, but, you know, we have another fantastic discussion about the rise of the nuns, and they're not going away. And matter of fact, the numbers, by all projections that I've seen, are going to be bigger and bigger and a bigger percentage of the population. I just hope they can get in charge of politics and overcome gerrymandering in time to reverse the fuckery that we are experiencing in real time today. So the future looks good as long as they can start to fix and undo things that other people are fucking up at this point in time. But anyway, we're going to talk about that. And the nice thing about Ryan's perspective is he is a religious leader. He is a minister in a church, and he is a data analyst. And we are going to talk about the data. We're going to talk about his graphs and charts. And we're going to talk about his church and how that's going. So I think you're going to really, really enjoy that. The Investing Skeptically segment for today is about new home sales and interest rates. And I just saw some headlines talking about how new home sales are, what was the word they used? Soaring. And we're going to look into that data and see if new home sales are soaring and what that actually means in reality, because data can be twisted and manipulated to make it look one way versus the other. And I'm going to try to get to the bottom of the picture there. So we're going to have fun with that. Real quick side note, I must have mentioned probably multiple times that solar panels are now on in the Orlando house, which is fantastic. And the interesting thing is, for a couple of different reasons, it turns out that the panels or the size of the solar system on the Orlando house is virtually identical to the size of the panels in the Chicago house. So it could hopefully provide some interesting comparisons. And of course, if you have questions about solar panels, or someone told you can get solar panels for free, and you have questions, of course, you can email me, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and maybe I can be helpful. But anywho, the solar panels got turned on, and of course, they got turned on right at the start, at the beginning of the rainy season. So for the first couple of weeks, most days, the production is lower than I was hoping for. Not lower on an ongoing basis, but lower because there's a lot of clouds. Lower because some days it was like dark and rained or partially rained for a long period of time. And during this first few weeks, and I'm expecting that this will change over time, but during the first few weeks, the production of the east-facing panels is 20% higher than the south-facing panels. And that's because of when it rains. So most mornings, it's maybe a little hazy in the beginning, and it burns off as the temperature goes up and the humidity falls. And then you get mostly clear to completely clear for hours and hours and hours. And of course, all the east-facing panels are getting all of that beautiful sunlight. And interestingly, of course, the for me, it's different because living in Chicago and the Midwest for so long, the sun here in the summer is really high. I know it's not directly overhead because we're not near one of the tropics, and I can't even remember which one is the northern one. I'll have to look it up. But the sun gets really high, and those eastern panels get the morning sun when it's clear. They get the afternoon sun, and only really late in the day do they not get anything. Whereas the south-facing panels, which should and probably will, in the long run, over a period of a year, produce more power. Right now, when they should be at their peak, 12, 1, 2, 3 in the afternoon, that's when it's often the most cloudy. That's when the humidity lifts up and we get that tropical weather where the storms come and it rains and it gets dark and really humid. The other factor I think is fascinating is I've looked at some of the peak production so far. The house in Chicago on its best day is getting 5 to 8 more kilowatt hour in a day than the Orlando house is. And so that's curious. Now, I haven't had a perfect day yet in Orlando, and I'm looking at pretty much a perfect day where there's just no clouds, no haze, nothing in the atmosphere, too material to block the sunlight. So why is the production 5 to 6 to 8 kilowatt hours lower in Orlando? Because you'd think it'd be higher. At this point, my educated guess is 2 things. One, as temperatures get higher, solar panels generally become less efficient. And so you have the hot solar panels produce less. In the Midwest, in Chicago, it's several to many degrees cooler in the afternoon on a good day, on a perfect day for collecting solar versus what it's going to be in Orlando. So I think that has an effect. The other thing, which is very fun to contemplate and think about, in the summer, especially when you get really close to mid-late June, when the summer solstice happens, there is an hour and 20 minutes, maybe an hour and a half. Well, probably more like an hour and 20. An hour and 20 of more sunlight in Chicago than there is Orlando. And just think, of course, if you are at the North Pole, the extreme in the summer is sun all day, 24/7. In the winter, no sun, ever, all day. Sometimes for months on end, there's no sun. So I do expect that in the peak of summer, really close to the end of June, middle of June, early July, probably the top producing days are going to be slightly bigger in Chicago than they are Orlando. And again, my Chicago solar panels face east and west. If they faced south, that difference might even be a little bit bigger. However, in the Chicago house, when you get into the winter months, the 3 or 4 darkest, coldest months around the winter solstice, and of course in late December, the solar production is very low. It is 1/5, 1/6 maybe. I'll have to double check. It might even be worse than that as compared to what you get in the summer, where I have every expectation. And we'll find out that in Orlando, it might only be 1/2 or 1/3. So fascinating. I'll keep you posted. If you're interested, let me know to talk about it more. But anyway, we're going to take a quick break and get on with the show.
Jesus had a tough life, boy. I read about that guy. Jesus is the only guy that ever came back from the dead that didn't scare the fuck out of everybody, man. He's the only guy that ever crawled out of a grave where people didn't go, oh, I just saw some fucker crawl out of his grave. Jesus comes back. He doesn't get any pressure. No static. Nobody's upset. He climbs out. He's walking around. Nobody's upset. They can eat with him and everything, It's like, isn't that guy dead? Yeah, but he's real stubborn, man. He won't accept it. Pass the butter. What are they staring at? Yeah. Yeah, I read it, folks. I read that book. He's on the cross. 30, 40 Christians standing around going, it's a shame that he has to die. And Jesus is going, well, maybe I wouldn't have to. Somebody get a ladder and a pair of pliers. I don't know if Jesus has actually spoken in an audible voice to anybody in about 2,000 years, folks. I think his last words may have been, oh, not the other, oh, you jerk, no. It may have been his last words, I'm not sure. Yeah, people say, you think Jesus is coming back? Sure. What's it been, 2,000 years? Boy, I sure don't want to dampen anybody's optimism here. It's only 2,000 fucking years. Yeah, he's coming back. He's going to do game shows. We're going to go, Jesus, this is your life. Remember this noise? Yeah. All right, don't tell me. Don't tell me. Give me a second. He's up in heaven right now. They're going, why don't you go back down to earth? Be a symbol of peace and love to the world. Help. And he's going, yeah, sure. Help, huh? Yeah, I'd like to help. Tell him I'll be there as soon as I can play the piano again. Thanks a lot, like being the only savior that can use his hand as a fucking
whistle. You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions. This Investing Skeptically segment is about new home sales or home sales in general, interest rates, the economy, the market, maybe little bits of a whole bunch of things. But it was inspired by seeing a headline that read, let's see, what do I have it here? U.S. new home sales activity rise to 13-month highs. And then another one that said new home sales soar. Wow, new home sales soar. That's fascinating. So I was like, let me dig into that. And I'm looking at this article, and this is in Reuters, which, can let me look at a few articles every month. But it is saying that home sales, see, it's so funny here because this is wrong already. Single-family homes sales increase 4.1% in April. So the data they're using is new home sales, not home sales, not single-family home sales. It's new home sales. And this is important, and I'll get to that in a minute. But 4.1%, the data, the number of units sold in April is 4.1% higher than the number of units that sold in March. And this leads to the claim that sales of new homes is soaring. Soaring? That sounds weird. Obviously, kind of a clickbaity. The goal is not to give you, I mean, maybe they want to give you correct information, but they want you to read the article so you see the ads. But I don't know. It's just this kind of stuff because you're like, wow, home sales are soaring. No, this is a very specific subset of data, and it is comparing April of 2023 to March of 2023. Now, the funny thing is the March data, which came out at least a month earlier, was the exact same as what the current April number is, but then it got revised down. And so a lot of this information that comes from the government, unemployment is kind of like this, inflation is like this, any other number, new jobs, they can bounce up and down. And of course, one of the things you have to look at is a lot of this stuff in this, I think, is also this case. It's seasonally adjusted numbers. So they know that over 20, 40, 50 years of data that certain things do better or worse in January or July or September or February, and they put a factor to it to try to even out the data. Fine. Of course, that should always be clearly marked. So it's not the actual raw data. It's the seasonally adjusted data, which I don't have a problem with. But if you take this number and compare it to last month's original number, the number is the same. So that's soaring. And the number from last month was revised down. Cool. And maybe that new number is more accurate, but that's just to show you the volatility from month to month. And you want to look for trends in things like this. So to call it soaring was false. I'll just go with that. False. It's just not right. Just for your reference, the number of new home sales seasonally adjusted and annualized, and this is also a tricky thing. Whenever you look at data, you have to know if it's annualized or just a month. And so for annualized, then you get into a problem. Are they taking that month's worth of data and multiplying it by 12? Or are they seasonally adjusting that for the next 12 months? Are they taking the last 3 or 4 or 6 months, or are they looking back at the last 12 months? And so if it's an annual rate, is it the actual rate that we experienced over the last 12 months? I don't know. I didn't dig into it that far, but these are the things that I can't stop myself. It's like, yeah, you gave me a number, but where the fuck did it come from? What does it mean? What does it really mean? What does it really, really mean? And so, new home sales up 4%, whatever. That's volatility from month to month. That's a joke. It also says that new home sales are up 11.8% for a year-on-year basis in April. Okay. So that means this April is 11.8% more than last April. But if I can have volatility or corrections or adjustments of several percent back and forth, okay, it's likely higher. But what are the last 6 months compared to the same 6 months a year ago? I mean, this comparing 1 month, something may have happened in April of last year. Something may have happened in April of this year. So I can't put a lot of value in this because it doesn't have a lot of information. Another thing that they do include here is that there's the median new home price in April was $420,800, 8.2% from a year ago. So it's comparing today to a year ago. I think that's a reasonable thing because that's pretty easy to calculate. Now, of course, why is it down 8%? Are the new homes that are available to be sold cheaper? Are they more expensive? Did the builders realize that people are starting to struggle a little bit, so they knock down the prices to close those deals or to offset some of the pain people are feeling from interest rate increases? Which, by the way, do I have this here? I think, yeah, there it is. NerdWallet, as of today, says that the average 30-year home loan is 6.82. 2 years ago, you could get a home loan or refinance your home around 3%. I know some people that did it under 3%. And when home mortgage rates were 3%, on my show, I said over and over and over again, if you have the ability to refinance your home loan at 3%, around 3%, get that done before rates go up. Took longer than I thought for rates to go up, but boy, have they gone up now. Like I said, long-term rates here now are 7%, not 3%. If you've been around a long time and bought houses in decades back in the past, in way distant history, 7% is not that wickedly high for home mortgage rates. I think the first house that I bought, little shithole that it was, so adorable, was probably 10.5% for my home loan. And then, of course, we started this long, slow downward trend of interest rates. And every year or two, I would either refinance or every 3 or 4 years move to a different house and then refinance that way. Anyway, I digress. So, but one of the things to keep in mind is, okay, I'm looking at this, comparing one month to another, meaningless. Comparing to last year, all right, a little bit better. But then when I looked at new home sales, now I'm looking at this data from 23, comparing it to 22. Then I compare it to 21 and to 20. Home sales, new home sales were considerably higher. Even in the pandemic, even when the world was crazy and everyone was arguing about whether you should have vaccines or not, you should have your vaccine. Just saying. Okay, so really interesting that it's more than last year, but considerably less than 21 and considerably less than 20. And again, this is without even getting into why are new home sales slightly higher, 10, 11, 12% than a year ago. But the really important thing that is easy to miss, and this is, when I'm looking at this headline, I'm thinking, how can there be more home sales when interest rates on a loan are 7% versus 3%? That should decrease home sales, right? You would think so. The really important part of this bit of data, everything I've covered up to now, the word new. It does not mean that you are newly buying a house or this is your new house. It is literally a physical house that is brand new and has been built most likely in the preceding few months. So all of this is data on homes that are new. Homes that aren't new, when they sell, that's called existing home sales. So what's driving the slight increase from last year? I don't know. Maybe more people were worried about interest rates last year. Maybe people thought the interest rates would go up and then come back down. And now they see, oh, they're not. So now I have to get my house. Maybe people have more money. All kinds of weird things can happen to the population at large to make a small percentage. But the thing that's, I think, is very interesting is these numbers are all considerably lower than what they were in 21 and 20. The other fascinating thing, I don't know if it was in this article or another one because I did a whole bunch of reading on this, is that the number of new housing permits is up. The number of new housing starts is up. And again, these are brand new houses. And I did say earlier that the number of new houses, annualized data, is about 683,000. So my thought then was, well, how many existing homes sell in a year? And I found from the National Association of Realtors, and I'm pretty sure, yes, seasonally adjusted annual rate of home sales in April of 2022. April of 2022. The number of existing homes sold at a rate that when annualized would be 5.6 million. This April in 2023, that number is 4.2 million. On their spreadsheet here that I found, it shows a decrease compared to last year of minus 23.2%. I didn't check the math, but 5.6 million down to 4.3-ish million, feels like about a quarter, 20% loss. So 23 is probably in the right ballpark. That is something that I would expect when interest rates go up. And since the 600,000 of new homes is 1/7 of existing homes and maybe historically 1/8 or 1/9 of existing homes, the existing homes or the new home sales going up 4 or 10% doesn't really come even close to offsetting the decrease of 1.3 million per year of existing home sales decline. So total homes, all homes existing and or brand new, is down 20+%. Not a real shock with prices going up and with interest rates in particular going up. And maybe the new houses have done better because the builders were marking them up to enjoy the higher prices and are now more eager to have a more reasonable profit, a smaller profit, but to move the houses. So interesting data. What does it actually mean? How do you interpret it? I don't know. It's open for discussion, and it's a nice little piece to add to the whole story about what's going on with the economy. But new home sales and home sales in general are not soaring. They're down. New home sales compared to last year are up. Compared to 2 and 3 years ago, they're down. So it's a mixed bag, and I think generally fewer houses selling. It is interesting that new housing permits and new housing starts are up, which is nice in a way because we have a housing supply problem. More people want to buy houses than are able to buy them. I don't know if that solves the problem because for a lot of people, what they would need is, a nice townhouse or a condo where they can afford to buy something that's their own without taking up a quarter acre of land and fertilizing the lawn and putting some fake plants in that property. Guilty as charged, although in one house, because the house in Florida, the grass that we have on our lawn, I am told, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that's fine. I learn new things all the time. But all the plants and trees and grasses that are on my property are native to this area. So there you have it. And quite honestly, without the grass, because my yard is sand, it's a sand dune. It's not dirt. It's sand. Without the native grasses, it would probably get caught up in a high wind and blow around. We don't want that. But anyway, I just thought you might find that interesting. Some information on home sales and interest rates and what does it tell us? And we'll take a break from this and go on with the rest of the show.
This survey of American beliefs showed that Americans, at a rate of between 48 and 51%, don't believe in evolution, which is like half. And on top of that 50-odd%, a further 38 to 40% of Americans believe that biological evolution has occurred, but believe that it was initiated by and has since been kind of administered by God. Leaving a very small percentage of Americans who are right. That's not my theory. But I've done material about evolution before, and in Australia and in Britain, it barely raises an eyebrow. It's just worth a chuckle. But in America, it's quite contentious to do comedy about evolution, It gets a gasp. It's the equivalent of doing material about fisting anywhere else, It's quite confronting for them. I've been heckled by a man in the front row in New York loudly defending his disbelief in evolution. I've been pulled aside in foyers by people defending their disbelief in evolution in the same terms, interestingly enough. It's the same defense that the intelligent design movement uses in the high courts of American states to try and sneak its pseudoscience into American high schools. And that defense is always, but evolution is only a theory. Which is true. I mean, it is a theory, and it's good that they say that. I think it gives you hope, doesn't it? That maybe they feel the same way about the theory of gravity. And they might just float the fuck away.
The Phil Ferguson Show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing said on the show should be interpreted as personalized investment advice. Investments should be based on your personal situation, and you, of course, should consult with your financial advisor or tax professional before taking any actions.
You're listening to The Phil Ferguson Show.
Welcome back, everybody. We have a return guest, a friend of the show, I'd like to thank, Ryan Burge. How are you today, sir?
Good, Phil. So glad to be with you. Plus, you got a 217 number, which is where EIU's at. That's in the 217 area code, which I love.
Well, it's funny because it is a huge perk for me now to have this number from where I lived like 15 years ago in the East Central Illinois, because spam callers often spoof or show up on your phone as if they were calling not only from 217, but from the prefix, the same prefix, the next 3 digits of my phone number. And if that number comes up without a friend or a family member that I know of, I know it's spam, like 99% of the time. So I get tons of telemarketer calls from 217, and I can easily ignore them.
There's no telemarketers in the 217. They're just trying to survive day to day.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a guy years ago that called me, and I said, where are you located? And he's like, what? And I go, where are you located? And he goes, well, I'm in New York. And I said, well, your phone number shows that you're from Champaign, Illinois. And he goes, no, I'm in New York. And I said, okay, can you share with your employer that I consider that to be deceitful and potentially fraudulent, and I can't do business with a company that works like that? And he goes, sure, I'll let them know. I want to tell you about what we can help you with. And I said, I don't think you paid attention to what I just said. So that's the second thing that would prevent me from having communication with you. You're not listening. But I just said that the behavior is fraudulent and I can't work with you. Okay, cool. Well, let me tell you. And okay, he doesn't get it. So
hey, ABC, Phil.
Yeah.
Always be closing.
Always be, yeah. It's so much fun. Now, because I want to double check, last time we talked and when you write, you are a religious person. Is that correct?
I am not just a religious person. I'm also a pastor. I've been pastoring First Baptist Church in Mount Vernon, Illinois for over 16 years now.
And what denomination is that?
American Baptist. We are the non-slave owning Baptists.
That's hysterical, dude.
It's true, though. I mean, we broke off in 1845. There was a fight, and the Baptists were all together. Like, they were one denomination in America. And in 1845, the Southern Baptist Convention broke away because the question was, can missionaries own slaves?
Yeah.
That's really what was the key linchpin. And it was called the Northern Baptist Convention. My folks were the Northern Baptist Convention until the early 1900s, and they realized, hey, there's some of us in the South, too. Sounds kind of stupid, so let's call us the American Baptist Church. So we're the main line. We're moderate. We have female pastors. Same-sex marriage is cool. We are not Southern Baptists.
Well, I think that distinction is very important, so thank you for sharing that with us. And the reason I wanted to mention that you are religious, and thank you for the additional information of being a pastor, is that we're going to talk about some data that maybe doesn't look so good for religion and its trends, but you are not putting your particular religious spin on it. You're representing the data, interpreting the data, trying to prognosticate where possible what might happen in the future. And so if people like data, we'll tell them, go to Twitter. What is your Twitter handle?
At Ryan Burge, simple as can be.
And it's RyanBurge.
Correct.
So you can go follow Ryan. And actually, if you Google his name, and we talked about this a teeny bit pre-show, dude, you've been very busy. Because I thought, you know what, I'll pull up a couple of recent articles that you've written so I can sound intelligent while we're talking. But I found many, and some of them we might discuss, some of them we might not, or you can bring up one that I failed to miss or failed to get. But you're all over the place.
Well, one of my mentors once told me that the reward for doing good work is more work.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like in my world, is that I'm, listen, I fully understand that I am incredibly lucky for where I am in life, but it's also a burden because I get asked to do this thing. And I've never had a problem getting a book contract. I've never had a problem. Usually when I pitch, actually, I don't even pitch anymore. Like articles of different outlets, they come to me and want me to write something. So now it's become a question of what do I choose to do with my time? Not what can I do? It's what do I choose to do, which is great. I mean, really is a tremendous situation, but it's also a burden because then you got to figure out, well, you only have so much finite time a day. What can you use that on to be the most effective person you can?
Absolutely. And the other perk for following you on Twitter is that you have mastered graphing and charting. And
that's my job. That's the secret, man. I think everyone should realize, like, if you want to talk about religion and politics and not get absolutely just railroaded on social media, the best way to do it is just put up a graph, describe it in 280 characters, and get the heck out. And let the fights happen in the comments and don't engage. That's how I've gotten to where I've gotten to, is by not being opinionated. I'm just saying, here's the data, deal with it, and letting people fight.
And I am on a roll, and you are continuing this string because, I mean, I did see something that you put up somewhere, and I thought, oh my God, I haven't talked to Ryan Burge for a while. But as of May 16th, you have a new updated second edition book. And so in the last few weeks, I've had multiple people that have just put out a book that I didn't even know about until I was doing a little bit of background for the interview. And for the listeners, this book first came out in 21.
Yep, 21, first edition. Yep.
It's The Nuns, second edition. Where I can't read today. Where they came from, who they are, and where they are going. Listeners, you definitely want this book. If it's half as good as the first, and I know it's probably better, more data, I'm sure. Absolutely fantastic read on the shifting sands of religious attendance, affiliation, social interactions, civil actions. Am I missing? What else? I mean, I know there's more.
Oh, it's just the first book was, no one really had any expectations of how well it would do. And I ended up selling 5 times their goal, which
nice.
was a modest goal, to be fair.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a big goal, but I sold 5 times the amount, and it just there's this unmet demand in the world for people to understand the social world, written by a social scientist, all the training that comes along with that, but with an audience in mind that's not academics, right? It's like the average person. They can just pick it up and look at the graphs and understand what they're trying to tell you. And so, when they approached me about writing a second edition, I talked about the book, like literally hundreds of times on podcasts and talks I've given and these kind of things. So I had all these additional thoughts about, different things I went unexplored or underexplored in the first edition. So I thought, sure, they're going to give me a nice advance. The book already has like kind of a shelf life because the data is getting a little old. It needs to be updated. So took the data all the way up to 2021. Added a whole new chapter on COVID, really built out every chapter. I think this second edition, I really wanted to not be a guy who just did a money grab, who just wrote a new forward, spent about 2 hours on it, collected a check, and went on his way. I really wanted this second edition to be a worthy addition to the first one and worth buying again.
Yeah, and the only thing that I worry about, I love audiobooks, but I'm not sure. I know the original and other works of yours are audiobooks, but the graphs, man, the graphs just don't make it to audio.
I know. And I wish there was kind of a way to do a thing where, like, you bought the audiobook, you would get like a PDF. It just had all the graphs in it.
I think there might be something, and my listeners will update me, where you can buy the book and then get the audiobook for like $5 or $2 or something, because Amazon does that kind of thing, which is why you're not going to get rich selling books in today's modern world, because you don't get that much per copy. Am I correct?
No, listen, I won't say no one, but 98% of books sell less than 5,000 copies.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and not to go too far into publishing, but, if the book sells for 20 on Amazon, you as the author would be lucky to take $2 of that. So do the math.
Yeah.
Extrapolate it out. If you make $20,000 on a book you wrote, you are killing it. And it might take you 2 or 3 years to write that book. So do the math. The math ain't mathin' when it comes to book publishing. You don't write the book to make money on the book. You write the book to make money on the speaking fees. That's really where the market's at.
Yes. You have to have some other marketing or donation page or something, which, by the way, if people want to listen to your work and help you out a little bit, let's just jump to that. Where can they contribute, donate, pay, whatever?
Go to my Substack. I actually bought the domain graphsaboutreligion.com, which was available, which I was shocked by. Graphsaboutreligion.com. It redirects to my Substack, and right now every post is free. But I'm very close to hitting my free subscriber goal, and when that happens, I'll turn a paywall on, and then half the posts will be free and half the posts will be paid. It's $5 a month or $50 a year. It's a great way for me to be internally motivated to continue to write this stuff and make it accessible. And so I think Substack's a great model. I think it's probably the future of publishing. If you're a good author but you can't get outlets like in established media, it's a great way to build your own niche and really build your own audience, and it's hyper focused too. I write about religion, nothing else. So if you subscribe to me, you know what you're getting. You don't have to worry about sports or entertainment, nothing. Just me. And I think it's just the future of publishing is you get to subscribe to 5 or 10 Substacks you find interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone can go there and do that. They can follow you on Twitter. And before we get into the book, which of course we're going to do, do you ever feel like, oh crap, I should have waited for the second edition? Because as an example, in the last week, I guess, PRRI Research Institute has come out with more data about the shifting of religious preference and attendance and stuff in America, but you didn't have this when you did your update, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is, if you waited, you would always have another thing on the horizon to wait for. Like there's always more. Every year, like there's 2 data sources I use. One comes out every year, one comes out every other year. So it's always like, if I waited, I would get one more year of data, but then it just pushes the whole timeline. But like, for instance, with None Second Edition, I had that thing in the can I think it was in like September, October. And it's coming out in May.
Yeah.
So there's such a lag time that's the other thing that's frustrating about book publishing is, you could have a book finished in December and it might not come out until the next February, 12 or 13 months. And in social science, things change quickly. So, your argument might make a lot of sense today, but might make no sense tomorrow. And that's why, I always tell other people who are thinking about writing a book, you've got to be good, but you've also got to be lucky. Because you've got to anticipate what people are going to want to read in 2 years or 3 years. Because a lot of these you sign the contract, it takes 1.5 years or 2 years to write the book. Then it takes another year for the book to come out. It's a 3-year lag time from idea to birth. And everything in the world can change in those 3 years. And your book idea might sound great in 2017, but makes no sense in 2020. So, luck is always part of the equation. And it's not really a reflection of how good or bad you are as an author or your ideas. It's just how society changes.
Absolutely. And of course, the change has been more and more in the same direction, at least the topic that I want to cover today, which is specifically religious affiliation. And is that fair to call it the nuns, N-O-N-E-S?
Yeah, that's the word. I always have to say, it's not the Catholic nuns, not N-U-N-S, N-O-N-E-S is the answer. Yeah. And I got pushback too on like, why do you call people nuns? Like it's denigrating. That's the word that's been bouncing around this field for 30 or 40 years now. It's just simple, straightforward. You say it, and people know what it is. So, and I don't think many people are offended by it. They just understand, like, sometimes you have to shorthand things. Yeah,
and of course, the slightly longer word for it is the religiously unaffiliated. So you have no or none on a survey. What's your religion? None. And that's where it comes from. And we're now talking about 27% of the American population.
The number I tell is 30%. You put it at 29 last year. So you kind of assume it's crept up over the last 12 months. And in the book, I actually talk about this. There's estimates all the way from 21 to 36. But kind of the median of that is around 30%. I think that's the right number. But amongst Generation Z, it's above 45%. I've seen 48% is the last number I put out. So, it is, in every generation, by the way, is more likely to be none today than they were 10 or 15 years ago. It's not just it's not a young person phenomenon. It's an every person phenomenon now. Well, so, it's happening all across ages, races, genders, income spectrum, you name it.
And I was going to mention that, and since you brought it up, that when you look at age cohorts or age groups or generational groups, each younger group, generally, there might be some little wobbles here and there, but each younger group is not only more likely to be none, they're more likely to not be religious, and the number of them that are nuns and non-religious is increasing each year as we go forward. So without some kind of major shift, the chronology, the aging, what do we want to... Yeah. The demographics.
I use the term generational replacement.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the idea that old people die and are replaced by 18-year-olds on their birthday. Yeah, and that's how we change. That's how society changes. It's just slowly. It's like drip, 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 and then all of a sudden, 5 years later, you go, "Wow, what just happened? Nothing, everything, all at the same time."
And so this general 30%, as you mentioned, 1% or more per year, as those people who are 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 pass away, the people that are replacing them that are 30, 20, 10, and the future generations, it looks like, and again, if there's no significant change, and you just mentioned the youngest generation that's probably been surveyed is like 48, maybe now 50% non-affiliated nuns. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that number for the U.S. of 30% can't avoid increasing. It's just going to happen without some material change. It will be bigger than 30% 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? Does that seem like a fair analysis?
I think that I do see in the data, though, and I think this is something that I'm seeing it enough to have reasonable confidence that the number is sort of plateauing.
Okay.
Somewhere between 45 and 50%.
Yeah.
And you see it in the last like 3 or 4 surveys, and it goes up and down. It wiggles a little based on the year. But I don't think you're seeing that. I call it the hockey stick growth, right? Where it just continues to go up and up and up. I think you're seeing it sort of plateau. I always tell people I don't see a future in America where, we're like Western Europe, where 70% of Americans have no religious affiliation. I mean, first off, that's going to take forever. Just using generational replacement, it's going to take a while to get there because there's still a lot of old people, boomers in America, who are fairly religious.
Yeah.
But the other part is, if you look at the younger people, even then, I don't really think they're going to get far above 50%. And those are 18 to 25-year-olds, right? So that's going to take forever for those people to filter through and die off. So, I just don't. I mean, I'm 40. If I live to 100, I don't think I'll see a world in America where 70% of Americans are nuns. I think it'll be 50%, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe 55%, but it's not going to be 75%.
Well, of course, like we were talking about the books, you never know, because look at what was it? Ireland, Scotland,
Mm-hmm.
Ireland.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That went from devout Catholic to not in a decade.
Yeah, but and Ireland's an interesting example because of the IRA and the Catholic versus Protestants and all that sort of. Every country's different. Like take Poland I think Poland's a really interesting example. Poland, was an Eastern Bloc country, was under communist rule for 50 years. And if you look at countries like Estonia or Latvia, like they're non-religious. 80-90% of people there are non-religious. But Poland, actually over half of Poles go to church every week. It's one of the most religious countries on earth because of the Catholic presence has always been there. So even then you can't even like lump countries together like, oh, they're all, Soviet bloc countries. They're all non-religious. Well, some of them are, but some of them are the exact opposite. So the religious composition of a country is so unique. And this is why I study America, because we're so weird. Like the religion of America is very odd. And so that's also why I never get invited to go overseas to talk about any of this stuff, which is actually fine with me because I don't like planes anyway. But, what we're doing in America is not reflected in any other country on earth right now in terms of religion.
And at least not modern countries.
Correct. Yeah.
I know it's a favorite topic that people ask me, at least they used to when I would go to Italy. They'd be like, so what's with you guys and religion? Because, I guess probably technically every Italian citizen is listed as Catholic. They aren't. I mean, they're culturally Catholic in a lot of ways, and they go through the symbolism. But anyone who's gone to Italy, or like you said, most of Europe, particularly Western Europe, the churches are tourist attractions. And they have services, sure, but a church with 50,000 square feet and 500 people in attendance just kind of looks funny.
Yeah. I mean, that's what Europe's become. It's a museum of religion.
Yeah.
Or what religion used to be. And I will say, listen, America is. So when I talk about this, I do this in the book. The graph it's two things. It's GDP on one axis, and the share of the country says religion is very important on the other axis.
Yeah.
And it's a downward slope, right? The more economically prosperous you are, the less religious you are. So countries in the top left are, like Ghana and, Mozambique and Venezuela, places like that. Then you go down to the bottom right, and it's places like Canada, Germany, France. And then America's funny because if we were on the trend line, the share of Americans who would say religion is not very important should be less than 10%. Instead, it's like 52%.
Yeah,
we are an incredible outlier when it comes to our economic prosperity and our religion, which again makes us a very bad case to study if you want to look at comparative religion. America is not the case you want to use. Well,
and it's funny because I had another recording, which I don't know if it will go up before this one or after this one, so it's going to be kind of weird. But we talked about a couple of things that may cause that, and I would love to hear your thoughts on it. One of them is social services and the social safety net. What effect does that have on religion? And then in the United States in particular, religion is a la carte. So you can do anything. You can change, where a lot of other modern countries, at least historically, had one specific denomination. So when you lost your, dare I say, faith in your government, you at the same time lose faith in your religion because they're closely tied. Go ahead and expound on either one of those in whatever way you want.
No. Yeah, so people always ask me, so why is America so religious? Why are we not Sweden? And I think the answer is basically because the framers were dumb in some ways, but really smart in other ways. And Jefferson and Madison, especially on this topic, they were very clear that government should not sponsor religion. There should not be an official religion of the United States. And there was pushback against that amongst the founders because they came from Western Europe, where a lot of countries did have official religion. But I think what that did was it allowed listen, if you want people to hate something, make it part of the government.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just how we are as America. So that I think that if by not doing that, it removed that impediment. But the other thing that did, which is this really interesting theory amongst folks who do what I do, is called religious marketplace theory, which is the idea that religion's a marketplace, just like shoes or cell phones or real estate or whatever, where you have to create the best product with the best services for the lowest price. And, competition is what allows products to get better. Like the reason Apple is because it had to try to beat Windows somehow, right? And the way that Verizon gets better service because it has to fight T-Mobile. Well, in religion, if you look at how religion grew in America, it was the Baptists and the Methodists really took off during the First and Second Great Awakenings. And the way they did that was they basically gave $100 to a 19-year-old kid, gave him a horse, and go west, plant a church. This is all the money we're ever going to give you. And so you had to figure out how to plant a church and grow that church quickly to pay your bills, or you were going to go out of business. The established churches were like the Congregationalists, and they all had to get, master's degrees and were fat and happy. They paid pew taxes. They were all rich. These Methodists and Baptists were Rough Riders. I mean, they were religious entrepreneurs. And so this understanding of history is the reason that religion grew so fast in America, because it had to. I mean, these guys had to be better preachers. And I guess you could say, well, the people got a better product too, because they got the best preaching. And you can see it today with these non-denominational churches. The ones that are growing have the flashiest band, the best music, and the best lighting, and the best preaching, and the best experience. And that's how they're drawing people in, is because they're competing in the marketplace, and they're beating out denominations that have failed to, adapt and thrive in this new religious environment.
Of course, I always like to say, if you don't think evolution happens, just look at religion in the United States. Because it happens. And one of the things I'm looking at here, let's see, this is in TGC. I don't even know what TGC is.
The Gospel Coalition. They're pretty conservative, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I didn't know. You have a relatively recent article in here, actually in May. Why is the SBC membership declining? And that's the Southern Baptist Convention. Yes.
Yes. 16 million in 2006, and now they're down to 13 million. They've lost 1.3 million in the last 3 years combined.
Yeah, because you have this in this story, which everyone can go look at, I think, the TGC, look for Ryan Burge, May 13th. And again, a beautiful graph showing a pretty good growth and a little bit of a kind of a plateauing. But in the last 10 years, is that 10 years? It has been brutal.
Yeah, about 10 years. They kind of sat there at 16 million for a while, kind of like the top of the roller coaster, right? You sit there and wait, and then, whoa, downhill.
And the number of losses of membership, and is this self-reported data?
Yeah, so each church reports their membership to the SBC, and then they kind of aggregate it out. Yeah,
and of course, self-reported data. I mean, it's got its problems, but it's what you got, right? So, you compare it to itself. In 2020, 435,000 less members. 21, 410,000 less members. 22, 484,000 less members. That's pretty freaking dramatic, is it not?
I mean, I equate it to losing a small denomination in the last 3. Because you got to think, like the Presbyterian Church USA, which is like a liberal mainline denomination, they're 1.1 million people right now.
Yeah.
So it's like losing the entire denomination over the last 3 years.
Well, it's funny. I happen to know a person in leadership, at least regionally, in the Presbyterian Church, and this was a few years ago. He told me, and I may have to check on him. He said that within 10 years, half of their congregations will close. Half of their facilities will close, at least in small towns, Midwestern small towns, because there's nobody going. There's nobody contributing any money. They can't find ministers. And, the average age of the attendees is like 65 to 70. Mm-hmm. And so in 20 years, they're going to be 85 to 90. We know, probabilities of survival past 80 are kind of small, sadly, for those of us who still look forward that way. But these congregations are just drying out. Does that sound right to you? Is that happening in other religions?
So I wrote a post about the PCUSA using their data.
Yeah.
Because God love the mainline. They make all their data publicly available, which is, fantastic. They had 3.1 million members in 1984. Now they have 1.1 million members. I mean, you're losing 2/3 of your membership, and their decline is now year over year losing 4% on average, or that's what it's been actually they've never had a single year of growth in the last, 30, almost 40 years now. It's bad. And my projections say they're going to be less than 500,000 people by 2040. And probably to zero by 2050. I don't think people fully recognize like how bad that is, and it's almost every denomination too. By the way, it's not just we just talk about the Southern Baptists losing and the PCUSA losing, but it's also like the Evangelical Lutherans, which are a liberal denomination, they're losing. Every denomination's losing. There's a couple exceptions to that. The biggest one is the Assemblies of God.
Yeah, I saw that.
Which are actually. Yeah, they're growing very rapidly. They've doubled in size the last 40 years. They have female pastors, and they're actually really racially diverse. They're super conservative, theologically and politically, but they're growing, and non-denominationals are growing. Actually, the number 2 religious group in America today in terms of membership is non-denominational. It goes Catholic and then non-denominational, then Southern Baptist. There are over 21 million non-denominational Christians in America today. So that's really like, I always say that what's happening, the biggest threat to denominations like the SBC are the nuns, which we just talked about, and the non-denominationals. A lot of people who are leaving the SBC, those 1.3 million we just talked about in the last 3 years, a lot of them who are leaving they're not going to become nuns. They're going to become nons, non-denominational Christians, because they like the theology. They like all that good stuff, but they don't like the denominational baggage that goes with denominations like the SBC, who have gotten embroiled in a sex abuse cover-up scandal, which the Department of Justice is investigating right now. They'd rather go to a non-denominational that has none of that history, none of that baggage. And they also like the fact that when they give money to a non-denominational, it stays right there. It doesn't go to a national office somewhere. The guy who spends the money sits next to them in the pews every Sunday. And they like that local authority, not that distant authority.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing because the numbers of attendees in the Catholic Church, even including immigrants from countries that are highly Catholic, the Catholic Church is just shedding probably 3, 4, 5% per year. Does that seem right?
Yeah. So over the last, for a long time, they held really steady. I'm working on a textbook about American religion right now, so I have a lot of these numbers in my head. For a long time, Catholics were really, really steady. From like 1972 to about 2010, they went from 26% to 25% of the population. Yeah. So like no change at all. And then the last like 10 years or so, they've gone from 25% to 21%. So they're losing, and they've done it in the last, 5, 6, 7 years, especially. The interesting statistic about Catholics for me is that in the 1970s, over half of Catholics went to Mass every week. And today, it's about 25% of Catholics go to Mass every week.
Now, is that self-reported every week?
Yeah, self-reported. Yeah, yep. Which actually, tells you like either they were lying a whole bunch a long time ago, or people were just not going as much. But I think it's actually not. If you look at like other Catholic numbers, they're just not going as much. And it's interesting because I try to figure out why that is. Like, is it politics? It's actually not politics. I thought it was like Democrats who were leaving Mass because they don't want to hear about the abortion stuff and the condoms and all that jazz. It's everybody. Republican Catholics are leaving. Democrat Catholics are leaving. Like, the Catholic Church is in a real crisis because you can't really, operate with all these parishes when you only have a quarter. So on an average Sunday in America, you might have about 15 million Catholics in the pews every weekend.
Yeah, and they got a lot of overhead. And I know in Chicago, where I used to live, I'm now in Orlando, by the way, in case you didn't know that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes,
maybe?
Yes, very happy about it. When we talked about losing 4% or 5% or 10% over a year or a decade or whatever, the thing that is fascinating is, in my experience, and of course you can chime in from your experience, a lot of religious facilities, a lot of churches, temples, mosques, whatever, surprisingly, their budgets are really tight. They spend virtually every dollar that they get in locally on maintenance, roof, boiler, staff, facilities, and a very small percentage. I do a bit on the show where people will sometimes find budgets in a church when they have to go vote or something, or they go there for a wedding. And what I have found, most churches, at least according to the published P&Ls or budgets, whatever that I get from people, we're talking about 1 or 2% of the money is left over to actually go and help people locally. And so if this congregation loses 10% of its members and loses 10% of its donors, it's now not just that their budget is 10% smaller, but they can't pay the bills. I mean, these are catastrophic things.
And let me give you like a personal anecdote about that.
Yeah.
My church. Our church was established in 1868. And at one point was what I've been told historically, we were the most prominent church in town. We had all the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, all the sort of upper crust of Mount Vernon, Illinois went to my church. So we had over 350 people, 400 people at one point, 1950s. And then my church was the original building was downtown, and they wanted to move to a space where they had more room to grow because they were outgrowing the building. So they planned to build a building on the outskirts of town. And when they're planning the building, they knew they planned for 600 or 700 people to be there every Sunday. They planned a 2-story building that was like 25,000 square feet, sitting on 7.5 acres of ground. So a huge facility.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was when they were fundraising for that, it took a couple years to fundraise for that and then actually break ground and all that kind of stuff. What happened was there was a split in the church because the pastor was having an affair with the secretary. At least that's what I was told. And he went to start a new church in town. Well, obviously the fundraising for the new building dried up significantly because of the scandal. And so they had to redo the plans and take the building from 25,000 square feet to about 15,000 square feet. So took the second story off entirely. And now that building still stands. It was built. It was commissioned in 1964. We've been in there for about 50 years now, 60 years almost. And it's 15,000 square, 7.5 acres of ground. The heating bill every month was $1,000 a month. The insurance was $6,000 a year. We were spending about $30,000 a year just on maintenance and upkeep of the building. And we were a congregation at that point of 20 people, spending $30,000 on a building.
How many people did you say?
Well, now we have about 12. At that point, we had about 20 or 25 when we started thinking about what to do with the building. We tried to sell the building. That was our initial. And you know what's a really weird conversation? Hey, how much is this building worth?
Yeah.
No one knows. We had to call an appraiser in, and he goes, guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't have a lot of comps for you. Not a lot of churches are selling. So we ended up comping the building at like $400,000, which is, it seemed low, but
that's a kick in the nuts, man.
Yeah. Wow. I was like, okay, $400,000. But the rebuild cost for the insurance was $1.8 million. If the building got knocked down, that's how much it would cost to rebuild at $1.8 million. We put it on the market. We marketed it to everybody who was interested in it. We had several people walk through the building. We had one offer. It was for $150,000.
I think I might need to find a new hobby. This sounds sexy, man. I just go to the Midwest, I think, and maybe this was one of your articles or something else that I read, that in the Midwest, it's finally come around where people are leaving in droves like they have in the Northwest and the Northeast. But maybe I can go buy a church. Did you sell it?
No, we actually gave it away.
Who'd you give it to?
So a Christian school.
Okay.
They were starting a Christian school in town, and they started in their own church building. They ran out of room though because they were growing pretty fast, and they needed like their own building. So the way it works now is that they take care of the building wholesale. All the maintenance, upkeep, utilities. We pay them $100 a month, and we get to worship. We basically get the building on the weekends and Mondays because they don't have church. They don't have school on Mondays. They have Tuesday through Friday, so we have the building Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and we pay $100 a month, and they take care of everything else. And we get to stay there for as long as we want.
Wow. And did you say, I'm still processing before, you have 12 members?
Yeah, on an average Sunday, we'll have about 12 people there, yeah.
Wow. That's on the small side, as you know.
I'm fully aware of that, Phil. Yeah, it's we're getting to the point now where we have to make a decision about what's viable for us, like what makes sense for us. Do we still want to meet every week? Because closing now is easy because we also had to dispose of a lot of assets, tangible assets over the last couple of years, moving from owning the whole building to owning none of the building. You have to get rid of a lot of stuff, and I think that's something that people don't think about is there's going to be a ton of pulpits for sale in 10 years,
and benches,
thousands of them, and no one wants them because these new non-denom churches don't use traditional vestiges of religion. They use lucite podiums and things like that. So there's going to be like communion tables and robes and all that kind of, and pews there's going to be an overabundance of those over the next 20 or 30 years. And there's really no market for that stuff.
And okay, you're a minister, pastor? Minister?
Pastor, yep.
Pastor?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see any chance in the next 20 years that this is going to change direction? Or is this kind of baked in the cake like we talked about?
I think it's mergers and acquisition time. Like that's, like how a business is, like, it doesn't make a lot of sense to have 7 cell phone companies. You're better off having 3.
Yeah.
Because just economies of scale. I think what you're seeing with religion is you're going to see, instead of having, 10 churches of 400, you're going to have 4 churches of 1,000 or more, right? Because churches of that scale, they're actually more efficient with their money. Because you can hire a full-time person who manages the entire building, right? Yeah. You have multiple pastors. You can have a student pastor, a youth pastor, a senior adult pastor, a visitation pastor, all that stuff. And you can also provide a lot more services. The building's bigger.
Well, you can, of course,
maintain. Yeah.
I wonder, are they scaling up the problem? Because everything's going along, and my historical involvement with churches is complicated. I'm not going to dig into it here, but again, if their budget is pretty tight, if they lose 10% of the revenue and they have a really big facility, if they have to start laying off staff, if the minister is caught sleeping with this office receptionist, or 5 women and 2 dudes in the congregation, whatever they fancy, it's just, I think it's like a bigger scale to break, because the Crystal Cathedral out in California, it was run by one guy. And when you're not part of a denomination, maybe in the short run, these non-denominational churches bring in people because they don't want to be involved with the big church. But as soon as you find out what has been hidden in the darkness is the leaders of this church are doing the same stupid, immoral stuff that the mainline religions were, and the attendance falls off, and poof, now it goes broke.
See, to me, this is like the elephant in the room that no one's talking about is, at least with denominations, you typically have some rules and regulations and oversight and lawyers and stuff like that, because you got to, when you have, million members. And
the congregation can vote out a minister or vote for lack of confidence, no confidence vote. And the synod or the higher organization can find a new pastor or worship leader. But if you are in a church that's a cult of personality because of the one person who built it, when they die, when they get caught doing something, how do you recover from that?
I'll give you a good example. Bill Hybels was the pastor of Willow Creek Church, which is in the Chicago suburbs.
I know it well. Well, not that well, but I know of it, yes.
Yeah, he really was like a pioneer of what's called the seeker-sensitive church movement, which is like basically try to not be offensive with church. So take the crucifix out. You don't have to wear nice clothes. Like make it very like schmaltzy, like very like Walmart style religion. Yeah. And hey, very successful. You cannot doubt that the dude was very successful. That church grew to 15,000, 20,000 people every weekend. I mean, just an absolute success story. And he announced he was going to retire like 3 years before he actually wanted to walk away from the pulpit. So he had a nice long process to, find new people. And they actually hired a man and a woman to replace him as the pastor of his church, which, is pretty progressive as evangelicalism goes. And then it came out that he had had some sexual improprieties when he was pastor. And the board had largely covered it up. And now that church is half the size it was during its height. And they've had to close buildings, lay off staff. I mean, so even if you try to set it up with a good transition and do everything right on paper, you still can, go in the ditch because of things you did 15 or 20 years ago. And again, there's no one to come rescue you in a non-denominational church. There's no adults that you can swoop in and check things out because they're all in the room at all times. And if you think like sexual abuse is a problem, like the SBC obviously has a sexual abuse problem. So does the Catholic Church. Yeah. These non-denominationals, there's sexual abuse going on in those churches right now, but there's just no one to go check. Right. Yeah. No one to investigate because they're all in that same room together.
I can't remember. I think it was an Intelligence Squared debate in the UK on TV where a religious leader was talking about, child rape, I'll call it. Mm-hmm. And he said something like, 30 years ago, we didn't know that it was wrong. And the audience gasped. It's like, how did you not think that was a problem? And of course, specifically from the Catholic Church, and now, of course, the Southern Baptist Convention, when they come out and they say, that was in the past and we fixed it. Really? Where's your
Yeah.
documentation that you fixed it? Because I'm betting they didn't. But
We actually asked that question on a survey of people who left religion behind. We call them de-church people. People who used to go once a month or more now go seldom or never. We asked the question, do you think that child abuse happens more often in churches than other places? And the public's really split on that question. Like a third says yes, a third says no, and a third says, I don't know. So, I mean, I think that the public is really like, if you look at the data, when you talk to a lot of people who are like ex-Catholics, say, well, it's because of the pedophilia scandal.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of them, that's just the easy way to walk away from everything else, right? It's just like they were already out of the church before that. It was just like it's a good way to end the conversation, saying like, oh, it's because of the pedophile thing. Like, that's why I left. And that may be part of it, but I think for a lot of them, they were leaving anyway, and it's a bunch of other stuff at the same time.
yeah, it's all stuff. I'm looking at an Axios article that you did not write. So it's not 100% about you today, but it should be. But this is rising number of Americans are switching religions.
Yep.
And it's becoming more and more so, more common, more frequent. And the number one reason that is in this article, stopped believing in the religion's teachings. Wow. 56% of people. And I think I know, and again, you're the expert in this, so let me know if I'm right or wrong. When people start hopping or shopping or changing religions, that is a very ripe group to just walk out altogether. Does that seem fair?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I mean, they're malleable. Like, the thing is, like, when you go to pastors' conferences, you hear things you typically wouldn't hear. And one of them is you don't want church hoppers in your church. Because if they hop from another church to your church, they're going to hop. As soon as you say something that they don't like, they're gone again.
Yeah.
They're going to stir it up and leave. The people you want are people who have been there for, like their third generation Southern Baptist or United Methodist or whatever, because they're committed to the institution.
Or young adults with little kids.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You want young adults with kids because otherwise your church is going to die soon.
Yeah.
But I think that's the other problem is we're facing a dramatic decline in institutional trust in America.
Yes.
And it's not just religion, by the way. It's banks, it's unions, it's corporations, it's Supreme Court, it's everything. We're losing trust in every institution. And I think religion is, and that's why, but to go back to the non-denominational thing just one more time, that's why they're doing so well, is because they're not institutions. They're just one little church here in the town, right? It's not a whole denomination with apparatus above it. So I think that's one of the reasons that these denominations are facing headwinds. It's because people just don't trust big anything. They like small, local, I know the guy, I know his deal, I know he won't screw us over, when he could be just as likely to screw you over as the denomination would, but it feels different because you know him.
Well, and you don't know yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the Catholic Church was huge 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and so there's a lot of baggage to come out. The new church might be 5, 10, 15, 20 years old, and there may be absolutely no problems, but if there are problems, you don't know about them yet because they've successfully hidden it. But boy, we're having so much fun. We're going long, which is I'm perfectly fine with. What else about you or your work or your book or some neat articles that you've recently written should we mention that we haven't talked about yet?
Oh, I just had a piece in Politico that ran on last Sunday. And so every 10 years, there's this thing that gets released called the Religion Census, which is a tremendous data operation. They contact every denomination of every stripe in America and ask them, can we see your membership numbers for every church you have or every mosque or synagogue you have in the country?
Yeah.
And so they aggregate all this up, and you can actually measure religious change at the county level every 10 years, which is just tremendous.
Is this from May 14th?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Hang on 1 second. I'm going to give everybody the title so they can go find it and read it.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Politico, of course. The religious landscape is undergoing massive change. It could decide the 2024 election because I had this saved up. But go on with the decline you're talking about, but then I want to bring it into politics. So go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So what you're seeing is that like religion's declining overall. We know that. We just talked about that, right? It's going down, but it's not going down everywhere geographically. Like there's some places where religion's actually having a resurgence. And there's some places where religion's declining big time. And this is what people like. They don't have a really good conception of like where religion's declining. It's not declining where you think it would be declining, like in places like Oregon, Washington, Massachusetts, places. It is declining there. But really, like the big declines are in places like Minnesota, Michigan, Iowa, Illinois. And so the Politico piece, not to step on your question, Phil, but I'll kind of lean into it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing there is why are Democrats winning now in places like Pennsylvania, right, and Michigan, states that are really important, but it typically are purple-ish.
Yeah.
If you look at Bucks County, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Philly, which is always in the news for something or other because it's like a prosperous, upper middle class, white people suburb of Philadelphia. The share of that county that was part of a religious tradition dropped 18 percentage points between 2010 and 2020. And it shifted 5 points blue between 2012 and 2020 in the presidential election. So I think like what's happening is you're building blue walls in suburbs of Detroit, in Pennsylvania, and even in Wisconsin around Milwaukee. You're seeing these blue walls be built up among suburban, educated, wealthy voters who are leaving religion behind, and that all this stuff about Dobbs and trans and all that kind of jazz is actually turning a lot of those voters off the Republican Party who would vote for them based on taxation and regulation because they're rich, but don't like the culture war stuff. And I think that's why they're going to continue to lose in places like that. And guys like John Fetterman won election in 2020 because of these culture war issues.
Yeah, and I think we touched on it in relationship to Europe previously. At least one political party in the United States has tied itself to religion. They try to be like all religions are equal, but there's specific philosophies that they follow that relate to specific religions. And that tie has been very successful. But now when people are leaving religion and they don't trust the government and they want change, they're not going to get the change that they want from the Republican Party. So as they're leaving religion, as they're leaving the churches, it's almost inevitable that they go to the other side. And so now the religion and the political party lose adherents at the same time. Am I saying that right?
I'll give you a little nugget that just kind of puts a pin on top of that. Joe Biden's electorate in 2020, 45% of the people that voted for Joe Biden in 2020 were atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. 45%.
Right.
So a very good chance by 24 and definitely by 28 that half of the Democratic electorate will be non-religious people.
What's that number in the Republican Party?
Oh, it's like 15%,
Okay.
17%, something like that. And here's I think to me, here's like my grand theory of religion and politics. It's a couple things. One, it's that 75% of Republicans say are white Christians. The country's about half white Christian right now, and it's 75% of the Republican Party. 38% of Democrats are white Christians, right? So it's a totally different landscape. I always say if I ran for a campaign and I just wanted to win, I didn't care about what I felt personally, I'd run a Republican campaign any day because it's easy. Christianity's good, Republicans are good, white people are good, it's all good. Democrats, now the problem with that is that's shrinking, obviously, right? The share of Americans are white Christians.
That shows where you live. Where you live, that would work, but
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's a shrinking base. Like you cannot rely on that. It's crumbling every day.
Yeah.
But the problem with the Democrats is they are a mishmash of all these different people, including like old school white Catholic Union people and Muslims and atheists and Hispanic Catholics and black Protestants. You know, it's this weird mishmash of people who believe in God a ton and then don't believe in God at all. So it's really hard to hold together a coalition of these kind of disparate parts that really don't fit together well on certain kind of policies about religion and religious freedom. So I think both parties have a problem. It's just they're completely different problems going forward.
Absolutely. Is there anything else on any topic that you want to cover before we wrap up?
No, I'm Phil. We've had a good conversation. I feel good about it. Before I start rambling on and getting boring, let's just close it up.
Well, fantastic, everybody. Of course, again, Ryan Burge, and let me see if I can grab this page. There's Amazon, The Nuns, second edition, where they came from, who they are, and where they are going. Available in paperback and hopefully in the future in audiobook for lazy people like me, busy people like me. But Ryan, thank you for coming on. I greatly appreciate you being on the Phil Ferguson Show.
And I also want to plug grassaboutReligion.com. You can subscribe to my Substack. My Twitter's at Ryan Burge. RyanBurge.net is my personal website. Please buy my stuff so I can continue to do this kind of stupidity and make money at it somehow.
Excellent. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Was that fascinating or what? Ryan was so kind to give us so much time to talk about the data, the numbers, the surveys, how it all works, and kind of helping us understand the projections of where we might be going. And thankfully, the younger generations, 30 and below, are 50% or more nuns. And we might be in a period of time where historically, and maybe this has been the case for the last 10 to 20 years, but historically, growing up, young adults, teens, high school students start to learn about the world, might reject their religion, might reject their politics, and but then when they get into their mid-20s and late 20s, they go back to religion because they have kids and they want them to have, quote unquote, a good moral teaching foundation. Well, because of the combination of religion and politics that we have in the United States, if you've kind of gotten slightly diluted to a lot diluted, not diluted, disenfranchised? No, that's true too, but disenchanted, that's the word we're looking for. You're disenchanted with the government, and a lot of people in the government are claiming that they're also very important. It's or at least their lives are very important with religion. And so maybe like some European countries, when you finally figure out that the government is not necessarily always working in your favor and you have to fight really hard, you might learn at the same time that religion is the same way. That religion is what religion does, and religion wants to grow, religion wants to expand, religion wants to control you, to collect money. It is in and of itself a giant meme, and any religion that doesn't do certain things, as an example, religions that discourage childbirth tend to die out because it's really hard to convert people, especially when you get to adults. And so if you're not bringing in kids, it's hard to grow the religion. Religions that do really well, Islam, Catholicism, maybe even modern day Protestantism, Mormons, as an example, promote children, a lot of children. And so over time, as that population goes up, the number of adherents goes up. Well, I think there's a break in that cycle, because as less adults are religious, or more likely one of the two parents is not religious, taking the kids to school, to Sunday school, to church is less likely, even more less likely. And like I said, young adults see religion tied to politics in a very negative light. And maybe if we can get some of our social services, our safety net improved, we can go full Europe on religion, where a lot of countries are now 60, 70, 80% non-religious, and these ginormous churches become tourist attractions. I look forward to that. I hope I live long enough to see that day in the United States where we can have legitimate arguments and discussions about what is best for the country based on data, based on science, based on what is best for everybody, and not what is best for wealthy people, and not what is best for the religions. So with that, I'll wrap up, and I thank you again for listening to the show. If you have questions or show topics or someone you want me to interview that you think I have a chance of talking to, send me an email, phil@polarisfinancialplanning.com, and I do hope to see you out there somewhere in person soon. Until then, ciao.